Good afternoon and welcome to this Friday's edition of the Friday App Clinic. My name is Reto. I'm joined today in the studio by Adam.
Hello.
And our erstwhile producer Ian.
Hi, I'm Ian D. Lewis and I'm gigantic.
And today we're going to take a look at music playing apps. So these are all apps which you guys have nominated in the moderator queue, and we're going to take a look at the top 5 or 6, depending on how many we can get through in the next 45 minutes. So let's have a look at the apps that we're going to check out today. So this is the list, at least it was, very briefly, and there it is again. So we're going to take a look at TuneWiki. These are all backwards on my monitor, so I'm going to look them over here. We're going to look at TuneWiki, ZenoAmp, then we're going to check out Spotify, UberHype, ZenoAmp, PowerAmp, ZenoAmp, and Player Pro. So
it seems like something was nominated more than once.
Absolutely, there was a little bit of suspicious voting patterns apparent in the moderator this week.
There's a massive amount of enthusiasm for ZenoAmp.
Absolutely, and I personally look forward to having a very close look at ZenoAmp. Before we do, let's have a look at our top tips for what every good music playing app should have. So this is the music player must-haves. These are the things which we're really looking for as a fundamental to what we think makes a really good music playing experience. So the first one is it must play music.
Now that one surprised me, Reto. That seems like a really stiff piece of advice there.
I know
might be difficult for many music players to.
We try and set a low bar that we think most people can achieve, and I realize that this is maybe pushing that a little bit high. But we'll see. We'll see. I think most of the apps should possibly be able to match that.
We won't actually be able to tell though, will we, because of the man?
That's right. The man will not let us play copyrighted music on air. So you'll just have to take our word for whether or not it's playing back.
Indeed.
And in fact, that's why we have Ian here on camera. He's going to be singing all of the music tracks as they come through to his headsets, in real time.
I hope you queued up a lot of Lady Gaga.
Absolutely. Well, we did use your phone, so whatever's there is what you get.
Yeah.
Perfect. What else have we got on that list? So we won't read through them all. We'll just leave them up there for you guys to check out. But it's things like we're really looking for that polished experience. So we're looking for things like the ability to control playback over the lock screen through notifications, sensible things like using audio focus and muting when we disconnect headphones, all of those sorts of things. So we've actually gone through and tested all of these apps for each of these things. So we will mention to you, even if we don't necessarily go through and try each piece for each app. So you ready to get started, Adam?
Let's get started.
Perfect. So we're going to start off with TuneWiki, which was by far and away the most popular of the votes. In fact, had 0 downvotes, which some would consider suspicious, and I just think is an indication of people's enthusiasm for an awesome app.
Well, TuneWiki has been around on Play Store and before Android Market for quite some time.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a popular app. So why don't we let's fire it up on the tablet so we can get the nice high-resolution graphics and see what it looks like.
All right.
So the first thing that I think we noticed when we started this up is that it takes an age to load. Transformer Prime is actually a pretty powerful piece of hardware, and that still took like 3 or 4 seconds.
Prime is actually a pretty powerful piece of hardware.
Oh, I'm sorry, you guys. Producer fail.
That was a little freaky.
And we gave you the executive title too.
Yeah, I think we may need to take that
That's
back.
exactly where you went wrong.
Too much power,
EP's
too
nothing.
quickly. Yeah.
So even the load time that we noticed just now, I think that this was probably a little bit quicker than the first launch was that we tried earlier this morning.
Exactly. Shall we see if we can bring up the phone cam, and we'll see how long it takes on that one.
1 second.
So starting now.
Yeah. 2, 3, 4. So again, that was probably quicker than the very first time we loaded up, but that's still a good sort of 4-second load to bring the first graphics up.
Now that may have been influenced by the advertising in the app as well in the free version.
That's very possible. So that's something to keep in mind, is that you really want to have that initial load time to be as quick as you can, so that developers, so that I should say users, don't feel like the app is frozen. That's kind of a killer move right away. So okay, so let's start have a bit of a navigation. So I think the first place you want to go is My Music, right? So let's see how that looks. So we can see in terms of a tablet layout, this part hasn't been particularly optimized. We have that sort of telltale, really wide list view sort of effect, which can be okay, can be a little bit off-putting. I think if you've got lots of black screen space or white screen real estate, that can be a bit of a negative. But generally speaking, I think it kind of works.
That's true.
Yeah.
So they have used the action bar. You can tell visually that they've used a view pager with the pager title strip style here. So we have an instant indication that if we swipe left and right, that we're going to get to some different content in the application.
Very nice. We've got the standard looking action bar. It doesn't look quite right. Is it slightly higher than it should be?
Well, it looks like on the tablet it's about the right size, but on the phone it seems to be slightly oversized.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at them both in front of me, so that's interesting. All right, let's play a song. Let's
Actually, would you mind putting the phone up there, Daniel, and
Yeah.
so we can see what Adam's talking about?
Sure.
While Daniel's doing that, I just want to remind everybody that I'm watching the live stream right now on YouTube. So if you have any questions that you want to pass along to Reto and Adam, go ahead and type them in there. And that's where we're watching. We're not watching on the Google Plus stream because I can only do one thing at a time. All right, go ahead, guys.
Right, thanks, man. And we should definitely consider, we should have kept something in reserve. Executive producer should have been the credit you get when you can do two things at once. But in the meantime, so let's have a look. So you reckon this is slightly too tall? Can you talk us through, how can you tell? Or are you just like Roman and able to spot 2 pixel differences just through raw eye?
It's mostly that.
Nice.
In this case, it's mostly a matter of sort of visually measuring against some of the other elements on the screen. But the real telltale thing in this UI in particular is if you check the size of the touch highlight that sits there, you notice that the button itself, the touch target, is slightly smaller than the full bar. Now, that's not a bad thing on its own, but it does sort of reveal the difference here.
Yeah. Okay, so that's nice. I mean, while we're looking at the action bar as well, I'd point out you've kind of got the settings menu here as well, which again isn't a standard preferences screen. You can tell from these right carets or chevrons, which are non-standard, so that's obviously custom. It looks relatively standard, so it's not too bad, but it would be kind of nice. There's no real reason not to go with the standard preferences screen here, so it would be kind of nice if you guys did. If we go back,
can you touch one of those? I'm really curious why people use the right caret. I have my own theories, but
usually it's just to indicate that there's another screen underneath it that's going to take you someplace different.
I think that's true, but why in particular the right caret? Because the action for going to another screen has nothing to do with anything to the right of what you see, right? So, I guess what I'm implying is that maybe that's a carryover from some other type of system that where the animation is different, right?
Yeah, it feels that way, like as though maybe the developers have used a different operating system, which perhaps when you hit right, everything slides from left to right, so that you can sort of
operating system like Gingerbread.
Possibly a different operating system like Gingerbread.
So one of the other elements here as well is the design guide, I believe, explicitly calls out the case of settings as something that shouldn't be either frequent, important, or typical. So realistically, that should be in an overflow, but it's entirely understandable in a case like this, where if that's the only option that would be in the overflow, then there's sort of a simple judgment call to be made there.
Yeah, I agree. I think in this case, though, I mean, what you've got here is, if nothing else, it's just taking up more screen real estate. It's something else that the user has to look at and understand. Like you see a cog and you're like, what does the cog mean? Which means you need to press it to find out. And I think just having that overflow menu is kind of where users are already expecting things like settings to be. So it makes it sort of cognitively easier to understand what you're supposed to do. And again, this is something that I tend to go on a bit at length, but it's creating that magical experience where as soon as you launch the app, you should be doing whatever it is that the app is designed to do straight away. So that you shouldn't have to spend time exploring the app and figuring out how it all works in order to understand its value. Like, people are going to install this, start using it, and the little less they have to think about how things work, it's kind of the more of a magical experience it is for those people.
That's definitely true, but what you need to watch out for as well, and I think that what developers look at when they make decisions such as this, is what do you do? A lot of developers will count clicks in terms of how deep an action is or how complex the process for getting to a particular action is. And I think in this case, the decision was made, okay, 1 click is better than 2.
Hmm.
So, but that's not always the only metric that you should use when deciding on UI elements such as this.
Yeah, and I think what you were saying earlier is kind of the key there. It's you want to make it really quick and easy to do the things that are most important for your app. And anything which you don't want people to do all the time can afford to live further away. And in fact, we had this discussion when we were looking at this app earlier today around the My Profile button.
We did.
Can I cut in for just a second?
You can.
Several people are mentioning that Adam's far too quiet.
Oh, am I?
Yeah, so
Is that just because I keep turning the radio when I'm talking?
Possibly. It might also be the mic volume, and also just project, Adam. Just project. I think you've still got half a shot of whiskey there. You might want to down it.
Oh, hang on here. Okay.
All right.
Excellent.
Now we have loud Adam, hopefully.
Where's that to go?
Or possibly I should just be more quiet and we can just adjust all the gain up.
I think that would be a terrible idea. I think you guys should be like our boss when we're in a teleconference. and he starts like shouting at the people across the room. I think that's how you should think of yourself
All right
now.
We can do that.
Project.
So shout at the users.
Shout at the users
Pretty
and
much.
the developers. Wow, there's so many of us on screen there. Okay, so like we were saying, we had this exact discussion about my profile. And
Did we want to take a look at that? I think that we had some other elements there. Or do we want to move on straight to...
let's have a
does it
look
play
at that
music?
first, and we'll go on to the will it play music next, because I'm sure we need to keep something there as a suspense for our users. Does
That's
it
true.
play music? So my argument was that my profile seemed like the sort of thing that should go in the overflow menu. It's like, how often are you going to change it? Any sort of social networking, you do your profile once and you're kind of done. You disagreed, and at the time we hadn't logged in, so
That's true.
it was hard to say.
So I thought that there was especially a defense for an app like this that aims to make your music a bit more social, a bit more of a connected experience. So I thought that decision reflected on where they wanted this app to go.
So basically we're saying if the whole point is to try and make it more of a social song experience, then it kind of makes sense to have that social media stuff front and center.
Right.
So if we go in, we can see that it really is. It's more than just who are you and what's your current status. You can add personal messages, list your top songs, top artists. So it's really stuff which is going to change on almost a daily basis, right? So I guess in summary, we're saying, yeah, fair enough. And they've got all of this. So this basically, my profile is just a way into the more social experience of the app. Though I have to say that the styling of this section could do with something of a revamp. Feels a little old. Feels a little staticky, absolute layouty almost.
Well, it is using the hollow style buttons and such, but I think that it sort of forms this grid of gray that's a little bit difficult to visually get away from.
Yeah.
I think that some icons or some other splashes of color on this screen could really liven things up a little bit.
Now this is the thing. Like I spent entirely too much of my life before joining Android writing applications in C#.NET for financial organizations. So I've seen far too many of these screens, which are just ranges of grey buttons on lighter grey backgrounds. So maybe it's just a hindbrain thing that just sets me off, but
That's entirely fair.
yeah, I'd like it to look a little bit prettier, particularly considering that the rest of the app is styled. Like you've obviously got a designer here creating these very strong visual graphics, and so it'd be great to see that sort of promoted throughout the entire app. Do we want to have a look to see if it plays any music?
I don't
Are we
know,
ready
it
for
sounds
that?
a little bit daring.
I know, but at some point we're going to have to run these apps really through their paces.
Let's give it a shot.
So let's have a look.
So let's take a look at our music. So we jump into what's at this point a fairly standard list of tracks. We noticed that, again, the view pager title indicator gives us a simple indication of some of the other functions that exist just off screen. We have streaming radio built in via Shoutcast. That's
This is
pretty
really
awesome.
nice, and this is something that me and Ian actually called out for podcast players, that we would like to see a media player which has both live, our own audio that we can listen to, and also having sort of live streaming radio type functionality. So this is a big plus for me. It sort of takes account two different kinds of app in one place.
Absolutely.
I have to say though, I found it a little bit hidden, because if we go back to the main menu, it's My Music, right? So I'm expecting this is where I go to listen to things that are already in my library. And
Right,
it's
there's
not
a little
until
bit of this my computer
Yeah.
90s feel to it in that case.
Exactly, and really what we're just saying is music. So it would be much nicer there, and being able to have the sort of the streaming stuff more readily available and readily apparent, I think would be a real plus.
Right. So Next, we get into some of the things on the library screen here. The shuffle all, show all songs, and show all albums elements here are some really tiny touch targets. I mean, these things are probably under 40 dip tall. Generally, we try and go at least 48 in both dimensions to get a nice, happy touch target that's easy to hit.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice if those were a little bit bigger. I definitely see wanting to break it up and still show a little bit more of the content, still separate it out from the songs themselves a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that the icons and some other styling could be used to help with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a few options you've got here. Personally, I'd like to see this as sort of, 3 touch targets, all a bit bigger, with sort of icons with text underneath or something along those lines.
That's an option.
But something certainly easy to touch. Every time someone tries to touch something and feels like they're going to miss or touches the wrong thing, it's kind of a bad experience for your users. So you want to avoid that if at all possible.
Right.
All right, Lyle Lovett. Let's have a look. Songs and albums. So again, we go through here. We've got the album covers at this point, along with the names and everything else. We've got
That's right.
touch target on the end. So this.
Yeah, so this was something that stood out as we were testing this as well. We have the secondary touch targets along these list items, very similar to what Google Play Music has. But you'll notice that these don't actually have any sort of a pressed highlight that's readily visible, or if it does, it's very, very subtle. So again, that's just one of those small polish type of elements, but it is responsive. I haven't actually managed to miss that touch target yet.
Yeah, so it looks like it's the right size. You just don't know that you're touching it.
Right. It'd be nice to see a little bit more of a visual confirmation of that as well.
It's also worth noting as well that we almost have sort of a contradiction in styles here, where in the config menu we've got the right facing caret, and here we've got the sort of the bottom right corner caret indicating a drop down menu. And I think it's probably clear to most users how those are different, but it kind of highlights the fact that in Android, generally speaking, clicking on something means navigate to there or perform that action, and anything else you've got on the bottom right is sort of an in-place context menu, if you will.
That's true. So should we actually try and play some music?
Let's try, yeah. Let's make sure that the volume controls work. So this is good. So we're actually adjusting the volume control of the media stream rather than the ringer, even though we're not playing music. So that's important. I'm going to mute that so that the man doesn't get us.
Well, it's always great to make sure that you can adjust that volume before you actually start playing. No one wants to get blasted by music the second they hit the play button.
That's exactly right. Or miss the start if the audio is too low.
Also true.
Just as bad. Okay, which title which looks, kind of like an innuendo should we go with? Well, I love it and he's large, or it's not big, it's large. Let's go with and he's large. Band, of course. That's what you were all thinking. Okay, so again, we've navigated down into the album, so now we go through to the song, and it all works. So it's instrumental. So you can see here, kind of, I think one of the key selling points of TuneWiki is that it will allow you to view the lyrics for songs if they happen to be in the library.
And not only that, but it follows a very karaoke-style scrolling mechanism for each line of the song, so that as the song plays, it scrolls forward and shows the current lyrics.
Let's see if we can find one. Let's see. Who might we have more likelihood of having the lyrics for? So you can see that the lyrics are loading up. It gets that's been pulled. You can see that as it's sort of pulling down, making that request, it got a little flashy in that box. It feels like you could probably do all of that stuff, like do all of the caching, the checking, do that offline before you start updating the UI, so that you kind of get away from that, things flashing.
That's true, especially when you have a local music library that's not going to change terribly often, or when it does, you know that you're reindexing, that you have some new content.
Absolutely. So here you can see exactly what we're talking about. You'll slowly, eventually start to see the lyrics move as the song continues to play. Ian, did you want to sing along for us?
No, I don't sing The Clash.
We should have checked this beforehand. Otherwise, it works pretty well. The one thing which you may want to be a little bit cautious of, and I think it's okay in this app, but just a general piece of advice, you've got some pretty small touch targets along the bottom to control the music playback right next to the ad. Now there are some ad policies around making sure that you don't have action targets where they could accidentally result in an ad click. I think the general way that music players are constructed is there is an expectation that that's where the playback controls will be, but it's something definitely to be cautious of here, particularly because these are all a little bit small, particularly when you get to things like random and repeat. They're the icons themselves are quite little and immediately next to the ad.
Right, and keep in mind that it doesn't necessarily matter how large the icon is, it matters how large the touch target itself is. How easy is it to really miss? So as you can see, as we go into press this, once again, this is actually fairly small, but it is separated out from the ad as well.
Yeah.
So I think that in terms of being close to the ad, that's not too much of a problem. Oh, my head's in the frame. In terms of being too close to the ad, that's not much of a problem, but it might be a little bit easy to miss those depending on how you're using it.
And how big your fingers are.
Also true.
So we can scroll along here, and so while we're listening to particular artists, you can see we've got more information about the group. There's this whole community aspect that we talked about beforehand, so you can see other people who have shared this music or are fans of The Clash. And so this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So we discussed this a little bit beforehand, but basically all of the sharing options that you have within the app are tightly bound to Facebook and Twitter. Now they're probably two of the most popular mechanisms for social sharing, but they're not the only ones. And as it happens, on this phone we have neither of these apps installed because we want to share things other ways. And so you've got basically this app which you want people to promote for you. And I can't promote them on G+, I can't promote them via email or anything else because I can only use these two things. So we would really like to see you sort of using a more standard share intent, so the send intent, so that any app that I've got on the device that I can use to sharing can be used to get this information out there.
Right, and just because we recommend the standard Android sharing doesn't mean that you can't do some deeper integration with some of these other specific SDKs. But in the case of this app, if you go to the specific share action that's here, we get something that once again is very, very tailored to these two networks, such that it's not actually possible to share any other way. Either that or we missed that functionality somewhere.
Well, and if we missed it, it's kind of too buried, and that's kind of the key, right? You want to make it something which people can get to. So we've got the overflow menu, that's all great. So now, actually I'm going to scroll back to this song so it continues to
I
play.
point out some of the other features that they included in the overflow menu here that are kind of interesting. They do have some really convenient things like keep screen on. Again, this could be useful for the karaoke mode style lyrics. You've got set as ringtone, which is always convenient. You've got start a sleep timer, so in case you have a long playlist that you want to shut off after a while.
Nice.
It's a fairly featureful app.
Absolutely, and I think that's something which we definitely decided when we were looking at this, is that as far as music playing apps go, this has kind of everything you could ask for. Most of what we're pointing out here is relatively minor UI tweaks, sort of things which you can do to make the app a little bit cleaner, a little bit more polished. But I think overall we're really, really happy with this. I think this is a great example. So let's check out a couple more things. So we're playing audio at the moment. If we turn on, turn off, try that again. So unfortunately no lock screen controls. Now this kind of sucks because for me, a big use case for me listening to audio is while I'm driving. And so I want to be able to get to those controls really quickly and easily without having to look at my phone at all. Like, I'll only of course be doing this when I'm stopped, but even still, I don't want to play with my phone, unlock it, I have a pin unlock, all those sorts of things. It just makes it more tiresome. I just want to be able to unlock, to turn on screen and hit skip, basically, and for it to do its thing. If we look in the notification, we have the notification there. So it's here. We don't have the controls in the notification either, which again is a bit painful, means I need to navigate into the app in order to be able to control it. And we also see it hasn't actually navigated me directly to the lyrics page, but I guess there's no need, right?
That's true.
Anything here which lets me hit pause is probably sufficient.
Right. We also have what seems to be a bit of a legacy Froyo style notification icon in the status bar here as well, with the gradient frame around it.
Yeah. Cool. Should we have a quick look at the playback on the tablet as well? I'm just curious to see whether the experience on tablet sort of lives up to the phone version.
While you're going over to that one, let me break in for just a second. There's a couple things that there's two of you. A couple things that I wanted to bring up. First, that apparently TuneWiki is a massively complex program that deserves its own hour of work because you're still talking about it half an hour after the show has started.
That's true. We probably should move along.
Most importantly, though, we actually did get a comment on the G Plus stream last night from Raphael Zuminski, who I think has a really good question. He asks, if you have time, can you please go into detail and explain the behavior of the up navigation versus the back button in the Play Music app? Specifically, how is it affected by different entry points into the app? So when you guys get a chance, as you're looking at the action bar, I think a lot of people would really like to have a better explanation of up versus back.
And happily, we have the right person in the room because Adam, in fact, gave a talk about this very subject at Google I/O this year.
Did he invent the word affordance? Because
I
I'm
hope
still
so.
No.
confused by that.
No, not at all.
Okay. All right.
You're not willing
So-
to take blame/credit for affordance? No? All right.
No, I don't think so. So we can definitely go ahead and include links not only to the design guide on the topic of up versus back, but also to the talk that we gave at I/O for that topic as well. I think that it, depending on some of the complex cases that you can get into, it can get somewhat sophisticated, although I think that there's a few overarching guidelines that tend to dominate.
Cool. Well, let's, as we go through some of these other apps, we'll see whether there's an opportunity. Because you're absolutely right, we should move on.
Right, and in the interest of time as well, I know that we're going to take a look at the tablet UI on some of these.
Yes.
But by and large, I think that music apps are really the sort of app that it's used to replace a Pocket MP3 player in many cases. I mean, it's entirely reasonable to really focus on the experience on a phone for a music app. So
Yeah.
we'll go ahead and call out when an application did a particularly good job of providing a tablet UI in addition to the phone experience. But
Absolutely.
in the interest of time, maybe we should
We should move on. Let's have a look at actually. Let's have a look at a few of these together. We'll check out ZenoAmp, and probably ZenoAmp at the same time.
Okay.
I think that makes sense,
some
right?
time there.
Okay, cool. So let's switch to the phone where we've cleared data, so we can start from scratch. All right, perfect.
So first off, I think that we might have a bit of a trademark issue on this. It looks like the ZenoAmp has used the Nexus X 4-color iconography in its app icon.
Yeah, so you want to watch that. So maybe choose a different logo that doesn't quite infringe on another trademark. And let's fire it up. Okay, so it's warning us that this is an early version and that we need to turn off our firewall or disable it for ZenoAmp. Yeah, I don't know that that's the first thing you want to be telling people to inspire confidence, like, remove security precautions so that our app can do stuff. I don't know, that makes me a little nervous.
Slightly sketchy, although they do have kind of a nice playful voice to this with their
This is true.
button
Yeah.
instead of an okay.
And this kind of goes throughout the whole app, which are quite nice. And so, we're going to go right off the bat and point out this is clearly an early version. So we're going to, it's definitely something we're going to look at, but, in line with the playful attitude of the developers, we're going to take a similar attitude, I think, at looking at this app, and hopefully you guys will take it in the spirit it was intended. So this is where we start with an authentication failure. Touch me here stopped, so I touch here and nothing happens.
Okay, well, something's lighting up there.
Then I can see, okay, so there is
Right,
there is something.
So if we touch and hold here,
Okay.
now we've got something that starts resembling a UI.
All right, so let go so we can see what else to press.
Right.
Oh, no, it's fading away.
Anyway, so
Hmm.
the first thing that I noticed with this app
Ah.
is that not only do they hide the status bar, but then they create their own. So ZenoAmp has its own clock and its title occupying the space where notifications would normally be, along with what looks to be a battery readout.
Yeah, and so, okay, so to be clear, so we spend a lot of time, and I think I in particular have spent some time online talking about how I hate it when apps hide the status bar, because, I use the status bar to see what time it is, see how much battery I've got left. The solution I was looking for was not to just put the time and the battery into your own fake status bar. I was kind of just using those as examples. Leave the status bar. Unless you're sort of consuming content that's supposed to be immersive, there's really no reason to take that away.
So there was one exception to that, actually.
Please.
And you'll notice this in a lot of apps, is that if you go into landscape mode, you're very constrained for that vertical real estate. So a lot of times it makes sense to perhaps hide the status bar in landscape, but still bring it back in portrait, so that if the user needs to get back to their notifications, so on and so forth, they can simply rotate the device and get it back. In this case, this app offers neither.
All right, so let's continue to touch. See, I'm touching in the wrong place because I can't get. Oh, there we go. So I need
Yeah,
to
it's if you
drag.
start sliding
So I need to
around.
move in order to get things. And so, all right. So again, none of these is entirely clear what I need to do to listen to stuff.
Well, we could try music.
But I
down
guess
at the bottom
music
there.
makes sense. So if I drag down to music, then I get this kind of wacky display. Now it's clear that whoever's put this together has some, I'm guessing, OpenGL skills, but this list view is kind of surreal in that
Right, I mean, it's clearly not a list view just in the way that it behaves. It doesn't follow the same sort of fling physics, so on and so
the
forth.
fling physics are phenomenal. It's almost sort of just accelerates. So I start a little and it straight away shoots up and seems to just want to keep going like it's in some sort of anti-gravity well, which is kind of cool. And then I can move these things around, but it's not really clear to what purpose. See, they were disappearing off screen beforehand, which isn't happening now. But
right. I mean, it seems that this is meant to get to different albums within a certain artist's catalog. But why you're able to scroll this when all of it would fit on screen and there's only one album available, it's maybe questionable.
yeah, you're just kind of wondering what is the, I'm touching things and everything's moving and I'm not really sure why and how. Oh, there I go. So Jimmy Smith is gone. I think I can get him back, but maybe not. I guess I have to come back.
One thing to notice on the on that scrolling list view is that actually does look a lot like what you'd see with our default physics if you don't know the magic numbers to plug in to scale it.
Is that right?
Yeah. If you look at the class that I wrote on custom controls, you'll actually see that I had to plug in a couple magic numbers that I pulled out of the AOSP code base to make sure that the physics scaled correctly and didn't feel like they were too fast.
Brilliant. All right. So that's an Android U class you've got at developer.android.com/training, and it's called.
It is
Building
called
custom views?
something like building custom views, making custom views.
Cool. All right.
Something custom viewish.
We'll paste that link into the G+ stream, I think, and
sounds
check that
wonderful.
out. Yeah.
And in the spirit of a beta, we also have our FPS counter up in the corner.
That's right.
So
You probably
it's
can't
updated.
quite see it, but that's what this number here is, which is running at a pretty decent sort of 29 to 30.
30-ish,
Yeah.
until you actually start scrolling, at which point
No, it's still staying up around 30.
it gets down. It gets down there here and there, but
It's not bad.
they're tracking performance, which is good at a phase of
Absolutely.
development like this.
So let's actually navigate in and try and play an album. So we've got this album. Again, everything's kind of this nice slidey, scrolly view. It looks really cool, if a little bit impenetrable in terms of navigation, because we're here now, and I'm not really clear where we are. There's no action bar. There's no sort of obvious navigation. I can bring up this weird sort of bottom slidery thing, which is kind of like my navigation-y thing, and I can move stuff around, but again, it's not entirely clear what I'm doing or why these things are moving.
Right. So if we try to drill in on this,
See, nothing happens.
and
And
select something.
so what you guys can't tell, which we can tell, is this is actually failing the first test of we can't figure out how to make it play music. Pressing this, selecting this does nothing. There's no sort of play affordance. See, I love that word now.
Oh wait, no, now we have it on a
It's
list.
here on a
Have
list.
we added this to a playlist at this point?
I think so, but I don't know how to make the playlist play.
Okay, did you just you just said my pet peeve, which is playlist. I have nothing against playlists per se, but when you're required to put something on a playlist before you freaking play it, that's wrong. You shouldn't have to set things up before you do what the app is meant to do.
Absolutely. This is
We discussed this with podcast players, and I went nuts on it then. This is even worse.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. I mean, it fails that fundamental rule, which is you should be able to start doing whatever the point of the app is with as few... Oh, you found a way.
We started playing music.
Outstanding. How?
Crap, now the man's going
That's a good
to cut us
question.
off.
Oh, we have 4 seconds.
Oh,
So we've got it closed down.
How did you
So-
do this, Adam? While me and
That's a good question.
Ian were talking shit, you've managed
I'm going
to
assume,
play music.
Right. So I think that the core issue around this app is really discoverability. I think that they've got this really interesting UI that they're putting together. It's something that is clearly meant to be operated using fingers, using gestures. It seems like they might be onto something really interesting. But you can really end up spending a lot of time with this app without it being entirely obvious how to perform basic functions that you may be familiar with from other music apps.
Absolutely. I think that's kind of the key here. And this is something which I think Ian and myself have spoken about, and particularly Ian, hopefully you'll agree with me, that you don't have to make an app which looks like every other Android app. It doesn't have to have an action bar. It doesn't have to have list views. Like something like what they've done here to create something quite radically different is actually kind of cool. We like apps which are innovative and change the way that you expect
Right.
things to happen, but
And music apps have long been the source of this sort of innovation throughout
Absolutely.
a number of different operating systems. I mean, you can think back to the early 90s where you had things that looked like car stereos on your desktop, so
absolutely.
on and so forth.
There was
So, I
a
mean,
whole
this is-
skinning community around WinApp, which no one nominated this week, so we're not going to look at, but that was kind of the whole point of WinApp, was you could get all these cool, different, custom-looking UIs,
Exactly.
which was kind of cool.
So if there's ever a place to experiment like this, a music or media player app is really kind of a great fertile ground for doing so.
Absolutely.
I actually feel like I could find myself totally loving this app. Like it could become my favorite music player. Partly just because I think what they're doing, now I could be wrong, but I think what they're doing with the UI is making it easy to operate without really looking at it. I'm just going to, I'm going to touch at a really predictable place in the middle of the screen on a target that's gigantic, and then I'm just going to slide my finger one way or the other, right? Not right now because it's not working, but it seemed like you might be able to.
Yeah, and this is part of the navigation issue that we see now. Now the various things come up, and so I guess that's really it.
So
It's
it
just
seems like perhaps we're running into bugs at that point.
it could well be, and I think if that's what you guys are trying to do, I think that's great. And maybe you're just suffering from that 80-20 rule where it's 80% of the way there. You've got all the functionality, you've got all the navigation, but the 20% that remains to be done is the bit which makes it actually impossible to navigate if you don't know the magic things to press.
That's right.
And that's why it's really important that you get people to beta test your apps and really watch to see how they use them. Because I'm sure if the developer for this app was standing behind us, he'd be like, no, you just have to press here and then here. Why are you pressing over there? Why are you dragging that? Why are you pressing the back button? And
User testing is really an illuminating experience.
It really is.
When you're sitting behind glass where they can't see you and you just want to jump through and
pound on the glass. Why? Yeah, and this is why testers are really valuable. Us engineering folks, we have this tendency to know how it works and then do it the right way. And then you put it in front of testers and they're like trying to press two buttons at the same time. It's like, why are you pressing OK and cancel at the same? Why are you pressing OK like 10 times in a row real quick? All of these little bits and pieces, when you see people actually using your app or testing them, trying to break them, is how you really get that next stage polish to something which people really love and are excited about.
That's right. So this app doesn't claim to be more than a beta at this point, and I think that at this point that's
Pretty clear.
good.
Yeah, I think it's really more of an alpha at this stage, just given that it's just a little too hard to use, it's a little too frustrating. I'd want to see you guys maybe spend a little bit more time building something that's a little bit more predictable before you spend too much more effort getting it out there.
Or at least start guiding the user through the first time experience
absolutely.
a little bit more.
All right, let's move on to the next app. Now, I don't have none of us have a Spotify account set up right now.
Yeah, we tested this on some other devices previously.
Yeah, Spotify in general, given that we're running out of time a little bit here, I think it's probably a reasonable one to skip. It's a great app, fantastic functionality, and a pretty decent UI. And they've actually worked pretty well in terms of getting some of the newest features integrated. Things like widgets and universal search. They were building those sorts of things straight in off the bat. So do check out Spotify. It's pretty cool. But we're gonna skip past that.
One of the other things that we would want to highlight in Spotify as well is that they do use the ever emerging pattern of the side drawer that slides out from one side. So I believe that the most recent update to the Android design guide has a few words to say about that as well.
It does.
So definitely go check that out if you're interested.
Yeah, that's the big tip. So yeah, definitely if you are interested in the drawer pattern, do check out the new design site update. It has a whole section on that. The too long didn't read version is the way the YouTube app does it is pretty much spot on. So if you do want to know what's the right way to implement that, that's probably the right place to start.
That's right.
Let's have a look at Uber Hype.
Powered by the Hype machine.
There is a lot of hype going on here. So, again, so this passes the test of straight away, you start up the app, you have a list of music, you press a music track.
And it actually does start playing.
And it starts playing music, which is perfect. It's exactly what you want from a music playing app. If we go to the home screen, we can go down here. I think that's it.
In fact, navigate
we
back
can navigate
the
there. Unfortunately, there's no ability to control the playback from the notification, which is a bit of a disappointment.
So how about the lock screen?
Let's try the lock screen. Let's try the lock screen again.
Oh, there we go.
It does. Nice. So they have the lock screen integration.
Wait a second. Was this the same song that we were... No, I believe this was from one of our earlier apps. I think that we still have... is that ZenoAmp or one of the other ones?
Could be one of the other ones, which is already running.
Let's go ahead and clear these out just to... just to make sure that we're set here.
Yeah. Alright, so we'll go back to Uber Hype.
Oh, we still have a notification sitting up in there for it. Interesting. All right, we may need to be a little bit more aggressive for that one.
All right. Nonetheless, so that's another app which is behaving a little bit less politely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the muse is there. So unfortunately, they're not on the lock screen, but it does mean that they are probably not using the audio focus quite correctly, because that should clear out any other app that's playing.
That's right. Let's just go ahead and kill this to be sure here, though.
So what's confusing is that it's what's playing on the tablet.
Ah, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it was ZenoAmp.
Yeah.
So nice work, ZenoAmp, on having the lock screen controls.
So what do we have in here? Okay. So testing once again. We don't, in fact, have lock screen controls
Boo.
here.
Oh, I was so hopeful.
Oh, wait. Does it happen when we're playing, perhaps? and
Maybe
then
that
turn itself
helps.
off?
Let's have a look. No.
Nope, we still don't have it.
Okay, so that's fine. You can heart things here, which is nice. Well, theoretically. So you need to be a member
need
of
to
the
be
Hype
logged in.
Machine for that. And actually, this is a pattern that I actually quite like. It's nothing gets hidden, nothing gets removed. But if you try and do something which requires a membership, then you point it out and give people the opportunity to
Right,
join
you
up.
wait until the last minute before you actually require that login so that people can really make that informed decision of whether or not they want to take that step and create an account for your service.
Exactly.
I am going to make one. I've got one thing to say, though, about the heart button. Shouldn't that be a star button?
Well, it probably should, but I guess it kind of depends on what they mean by the heart button. So
Right.
if they're favoriting something for their own sake, then I think star is a much better metaphor. But if they are sort of liking it, as in promoting it to their friends or something which they are enjoying, then heart, it kind of almost makes more sense.
By the way, I noticed that when we're doing this top to bottom thing, it totally doesn't work to have us looking left to right. I think what we want is to be like this, like Brady Bunch style.
What do you
Hey,
say?
Raytail, how's it going?
This is weird.
Hey,
Nice. I love it. Yeah, I'm just saying that, you don't get to pick your favorite, Lucky Charms metaphor to, there's a star for making something your favorite, and the heart means, kind of nothing to the average Android user.
This is true.
So, something
well,
to think
again,
about.
for something that ties into an existing service, if you already have a metaphor for doing performing an action like this, then sometimes it makes sense to stay consistent with the rest of that service as well.
That is a really good point, yeah.
So we see that in this screen we actually have a menu button of shame. It is there, it does nothing, which is particularly weird because we've kind of got this action bar type metaphor. And while we're here, we'll see what happens when we hit the share button.
Does
we
the
get
right
the
thing.
sharing apps, which is nice. So that's happy making. Now what's a little bit weirder is this icon here, which I have no idea what that means, sort of filter.
So,
But no, it's-
right. It
it's
seems
an
like
overflow
it's almost
button,
an
right?
overflow, located in the opposite position that you would normally expect an
Yeah,
overflow
so it's
button
kind of
to
a
be.
right to left overflow. And now it's weird because if we've got an overflow, then we don't need the menu button along the bottom.
Right.
And if we
This
go
is
back,
also another example of non-standard action bar in here
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
It's using just a little bit of a different size for everything, a little bit different metrics,
Yeah.
and it stands out.
and if we go back to the main menu, then we find out that here the menu button isn't a button of shame, but it is confusing because everything in this is just as appropriate when you're listening to a track as it is when you're when you're looking at a list of tracks.
And we do have one of your favorite actions. available in
Exit
this
button,
menu too.
yay! No, there's no need for an exit button. For a music playing app, as soon as you are paused, that should be the equivalent of everything stopped. You shouldn't have any services running. There shouldn't be any difference at that point between hitting exit or just hitting back. That should be equivalent, and so then there's no need to put it in there because again, as soon as you have an exit button, I understand that some users like an exit button and that it's a nice thing to put in there, but it's totally ambiguous. It's meaningless. No one actually knows what that exit button is going to do. So putting it there just runs the risk of frustrating your users and annoying the hell out of me. Let's go back in here.
Yeah.
Splash
we're-
screen every time we start up again. Is that really necessary? Like, we're not reticulating splines here. You should just be able to start off and have these things cached so that we get a nice, clean, quick startup every time.
Although I do have to say that if you are loading something for the first time, showing something a little bit more attractive than a loading spinner, I think that
Absolutely.
gets points.
Yeah, I think so. I think the first time you load, you want to have something. And we have sort of preferences around how much time you should be showing a blank screen, i.e. no time. So definitely having a splash screen or a loading screen the first time is nice, but everything after the first time, I feel like you should already have that data cached in a way that you should be able to bring stuff up quickly.
And just to run through a couple of other things very quickly before we move on, you'll notice that we do have the top tabs here to move between some different elements, but we don't actually have the ability to swipe between these. We do have a sort of a long press action presented in a nicer way than your standard
Yeah, that's
pop-up
reasonable.
dialog. So as you flip between here, we do get a short period of loading before we bring it up.
A bit of pre-caching here would be nice as well. There's a good chance that you're going to hit these top actions. So after you've loaded the first one and nothing else is happening, just preload them in the background. It's going to be relatively cheap.
And if this was something that sits in a view pager, then suddenly the loaders attached to different fragments make that very easy to implement, so
Absolutely.
on and so forth. So the other thing that kind of shows with this as well is we have this bottom strip on each one of these pages as well. That's kind of like a second set of tabs, kind of not. Is it more of a filter? Is it from different sources? We can go for Twitter over here as well. So this is something that always kind of bothers me in apps when you try to sandwich different levels of hierarchy on opposite sides of the content. I think that it makes it more difficult to tell where you're drilling down into that hierarchy, so on and so forth. And in this app in particular, you have a very small touch target for these bottom tabs that sits right next to the capacitive buttons for navigation, even on devices that don't use the soft navigation.
A couple of other points really quickly before we jump onto the lightning round for the last two apps in 2 minutes. We're using a non-standard font here. Now Roman's not here, so he can't go on at length about typography. It's a nice font, but it is a little disconcerting, maybe. Just having that different font style here, I don't know that it entirely works. But
it looks like it may be a part of their brand for the rest of the service.
That could well be.
That
could well be.
So we would have to dig a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah, and the very last thing I want to say is that what's not clear to me as a music listener is where this music is coming from and what the rights are for them. So it seems like someone is blogging about them. You know, I'm very conscious of not wanting to pirate music when there's plenty of sources I can use to get it for free. I have absolutely no idea what the scenario is here, but that's kind of the point, is it would be nice to have some better idea of exactly how this music is coming to be on my phone.
Or how it's going to be available to me if I get on an airplane.
Exactly. All right, so lightning round. We've got Power Amp and Player Pro, which both have very similar icon stylings, and as it turns out, fairly similar functionality. So we'll start with Power Amp real quick.
So Power Amp's been a long-time favorite of a lot of others around the office here. And once you start digging into it, it becomes really easy to see why. So they seem to stick with a lot of Android conventions just to keep you familiar with basic functionality. You've got what's not quite an action bar, but very similar here. The metrics are a little bit off. It looks like this may actually be an action bar under the hood with some other modifications to it. Have to look a little bit closer to be certain, but the convention is there, so you know where to look for that.
And as soon as you start pressing on the screen, you can sort of it shows that these are bars, that these are things that you can press, and you get the little help texts and things as well.
Absolutely,
which is really nice.
Right. So this was a great feature as well, is this ability to just swipe between tracks that you have available.
So this totally makes my in the car experience work. In that, you know, if I want to skip a track, it's just a swipe. I don't need to look at it. I don't need to find the fast forward key. I just swipe in the middle of the screen.
That's right.
And if we hit play, okay, it's not changing the volume, which is nice. If we actually find out here, we can see that it does have controls in the notification, which is excellent. And I don't know if it has it in the. It unfortunately doesn't have it in the lock screen.
This was the one where we had slightly different options.
Oh,
User
that's right.
Jim Jam mentions that you actually do need to enable the lock screen controls in the settings.
That's right, and we did in fact discover that, or at least Adam did.
Right, this is the sort of thing where it would be really great if the app detected what version of the platform it was running on and just automatically enabled this by default. But the fact that it is there, it still gets points.
Exactly, so that's great, but it doesn't seem like there's a good reason not to have that as a default action. I'd actually be quite curious to know from the developer's perspective why that is. You know, why not default it to on, given that you can detect what version of Android you're running on.
Yeah, it seems to be that they had some other functionality to enable controls on the lock screen for previous versions of the platform as well. So it may have been a matter of trying to keep your settings as migrated so as not to confuse users through an OS upgrade.
So maybe it's just a simple case of checking to see whether or not it's an upgrade or not, and then defaulting your options that way.
That's true.
We have some really nice options here. We're not going to go into too much depth, but really pretty controls for the equalizer. And in fact, you know, bass, treble, volume, the whole thing. And in fact, if you go back, it doesn't. So maybe it's just in the landscape version. It has this nice effect, at least I thought that it did, of showing the equalizer in the action bar. I can't get that to come up right now.
Oh, I think that was if you run it on a tablet.
Maybe that's tablet only.
This is one of the other apps that provides some interesting functionality on a tablet as well.
Cool. So we are totally out of time, so we're not going to go into any more detail here. But generally speaking, this is a really nice looking app, great functionality, does pretty much everything that we ask it to in terms of what a music player should do. So yeah, nicely done.
And most of all, I really want to call this out as well, is that PowerAmp and TuneWiki on its list of songs as well, you can really tell that they spent time optimizing and made sure that the entire experience was very smooth.
Absolutely. It's really polished, really nicely done. Now I know that our engineer is going to get really nervous if we don't wrap up soon, because we're not going to have any time for the team at the Friday Game Review to get started. So we're going to put a hold on Player Pro and see if we can maybe get a chance to look at that at another point. But absolutely, so far we're really happy with most of the apps we looked at today. I think there's some really polished experiences and some interesting up and comers. Definitely some interesting perspectives on the genre.
And what was really great is that all these apps really took a different approach to playing music. I mean, you don't see a lot of cloned functionality between these apps.
Very true. We didn't even have to go and pick and choose different things. That was just by virtue of what was on the front page on Moderator. Speaking of which, next week we're going to be looking at football apps in celebration of the beginning of the NFL season here in the US. So if you have a football app of any kind, please do nominate it in the Moderator so that the team can check it out next week. We're also going to try and start integrating interviews with some of the developers of some of these apps, probably a week afterwards. So anyone who has been reviewed on the Friday App Clinic or the Friday App Review, which came beforehand, do drop us a line if you're interested in talking through some of your decisions, or in fact if you've made any changes that you'd like to share with us all, and we'll see if we can get you on a hangout in one of the next few weeks to talk it over. In the meantime, thank you guys very much for tuning in. Thank you, Adam, for joining us this week.
Quite welcome.
Thank you, Ian, for producing the show.
You're welcome, and don't forget to stick around for the brand new Friday Game Review starring Dan Galpin and new co-host Ko Kim.
Outstanding. That should be a good one.
Absolutely.
And thank you to Daniel for engineering as always. And we'll see you guys all next week.